Xenoblade Chronicles 2, alright, let's go. I've played the game, I've beaten the game, I am ready to review the game. But not only that, I also plan to have this video review give you a lot of information. Much of the fan base's claims about the game, especially those 70 to 100 hours of story content claims, aren't really that accurate. But let's not talk about what we're going to talk about, let's go ahead and do this thing. Here is my review of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for the Nintendo Switch. The story of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 takes place in a world where the surface of the planet is not inhabitable anymore, and all of civilization, all villages, towns, and cities are built upon giant creatures that wander the world known as Titans. With the Titans slowly dying out, along with a fateful encounter with an ancient being, a young man named Rex ventures across the world in the hopes of finding Elysium, a mythical land that he believes can be a safe haven for all of humanity, to live in peace without constantly worrying about the Titans they live on dying and them with it. Now, the basic story of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is actually quite good, especially for an RPG. There's a lot of world building, and the story progresses really in an unexpected way. There are a lot of moments where you think, oh, this is so predictable, this is going to happen, and then something completely different happens. It keeps you on your toes, and that's one thing that's really interesting about it. The only bad part about the story is the character development. Every party member falls into an anime cliche or anime trope, and, well, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of RPGs do that. Final Fantasy, Tales, Atelier, Neptunia, they all do it. The way Xenoblade Chronicles 2 does it, though, feels very forced. You'll have a situation that is very serious in nature, and it'll just appear out of nowhere, as if they were using an anime cliche just for the sake of derailing the conversation into an anime cliche. It's too forced. With gameplay, it's kind of hard to define what Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is. It's an open world RPG, but its combat has elements from a lot of different kinds of RPGs. Strategy RPGs, MMOs, turn-based RPGs, action-based RPGs. So let's just call it a hybrid open-world RPG. Now let's start with the simple side of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Progression. Just like any other Japanese RPG, the story pushes you towards your next objective. When you activate a story quest, you have a little marker showing you where you need to go to advance the story. But being an open-world game, you could go there, or you could go to a million other places you have access to do side quests, loot treasure chests, or just explore and enjoy the scenery. Now that we've got the simple part out of the way, let's talk to how complex and confusing this game can be. Because let's face it, if you're not a veteran RPG player, you should not be playing this game. There are dozens upon dozens of gameplay mechanics, so many that you're given tutorials for them every few hours, and you're still getting tutorials when you reach the end of the game about to fight the final boss. There are combat mechanics that you always have to think about, like aggro, chain attacks, managing all of your tanks, healers, and attack characters. There are exploration mechanics that you have to watch out for, like the time of day and the tide of the Cloud Sea opening and closing areas that you need to use. Field skills that are required for optional areas as well as required areas later in the story. Managing your trust and upgrades with all of the Blade party members. All in all, there is an overwhelming amount of gameplay systems in this game. So much so that it feels like overkill, and even RPG veterans can easily feel overwhelmed by everything they have to think about across every moment of this game. Now let's get away from that overwhelming portion and talk about combat, which is complex but is very simple at the same time. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 uses what is known as the auto battle system. All of your party members are autonomous in that they automatically attack any enemy they're locked onto with physical attacks without requiring any input outside of being in range. You don't have to interact in battle at all until your skill gauges are filled up so you can use your battle skills. And we've got two more things to discuss before we close out this section: difficulty and length. This game has a lot of difficulty spikes, and every single one of the major bosses are gigantic difficulty spikes. So much so that this game is known for making you level grind again and again and again. If you fight all of your battles but never level grind, when you reach major story bosses, you pretty much can't win. And in almost all cases, you're going to have to go back and spend hours grinding grinding and grinding some more. Now thankfully the latest update to the game added an easy mode difficulty, making this much more doable for players that don't like to grind. Easy mode in no way makes the game easy. It's still very challenging, especially in a lot of the major bosses, but you can complete the game without having to grind. And that brings us to length. When the game originally released, there were tons of claims that it took 70 to 100 hours, if not more, just to clear the game's story, and that just isn't true. Take my example. I played chapters 1 through 4 on the normal difficulty, and chapters 5 through 10 on the easy difficulty. When I cleared the story, I had been playing for about 40 hours. Now think about this for a minute. On the normal difficulty, a lot of people were claiming that it took 70 to 100 hours to clear the story. Now let's accommodate, I'd say about 3 extra hours to my playtime to accommodate for how much shorter the fights would be on easy mode. That still lets us conclude that out of those 70 to 100 hours, 25 to 60 of those hours were just mindlessly level grinding to pass those story bosses. Can you imagine grinding in a game more than you actually play its story mode in a genre that focuses on story? That's ridiculous. Now let's talk about presentation. It's great in some aspects, not so great in others. When you've got your Switch docked, the game looks really, really good. There are no jagged edges anywhere, the CGI makes it look absolutely perfect, it just looks like a beautiful anime-style RPG game. When you go into handheld mode, it doesn't look anywhere near as good. The resolution goes down a lot when you undock the Switch, so much so that there are jagged edges everywhere, everything looks blurry, and really it's just hard on the eyes. A lot of people have speculated that the developers did this on purpose to extend battery life, which I'll get to later. The other nitpick I have with presentation is the English dub. Now the English voice actors did a pretty decent job on the English dub, but matching the animations in the cutscenes gave them a lot of dramatic pauses. Imagine it like this. The English dub has a lot of pauses in the cut scenes. A lot of the cutscenes in the game sound like that. I get trying to match the lip movements of the animations, but it just sounds weird and bad. Now let's talk about battery life. As I said earlier, a lot of people theorized that the resolution drops in handheld mode to extend battery life. Let's see how far that goes. Here are my times from 100% to 0%. With maximum brightness and the Wi-Fi on, 3 hours and 2 minutes. Maximum brightness of the Wi-Fi off, 3 hours and 6 minutes. Lower brightness of the Wi-Fi on, 3 hours and 22 minutes. Lower brightness of the Wi-Fi off, 3 hours and 28 minutes. I'll admit that I think they did get more battery life out of lowering the resolution. If they kept the graphics the same between docked and handheld modes, I'd say that 3 hours and 2 minutes will probably be more like 2 hours and 20 minutes. Now, in conclusion, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a beautiful RPG that offers open world exploration and a pretty unique combat system. Now, it's not without its faults. The story kind of forces anime tropes on the player way too much. The game is absurdly complex. The resolution takes a hit during handheld play, and the English dub has a lot of very awkward, dramatic pauses that shouldn't be there. Granted, it's still a blast to play, it's just got a lot of flaws to it. Reviews to Go rates Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for the Nintendo Switch a 6.5 out of 10. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them below or head to the website at www.reviewstogo.com.